This is Nick Black in Santa Monica, and I'm talking to one of the unsung heroes of American independent cinema, Paul Williams. Thank you very much, Paul, for taking time to talk to us.
Well, thank you for coming by.
Just one thing I want to mention, you have nothing to do with the other Paul Williams, the composer fellow, of course.
No, I'm 6'3".
First of all, I want to start, you from New York, correct?
Yeah, from the Bronx.
How did you become interested in film?
Well, my father was a school teacher, but he shot 16-millimeter film. Of course, he cut in the camera, but, we have home movies since I was a kid on 16-millimeter. I started taking pictures when I was young, stills, and he got me a camera and was pretty serious about it. And then I went to Harvard on a scholarship, and while I was there, I became a photographer on the Harvard Crimson, the school paper, for a while. And I guess my junior year was the first year they ever gave a course in photography at Harvard. And I was one of the 12 people they let into the course under Len Gittleman. And the next year, when I was a senior, they asked me to help teach the course. I was still an undergraduate, so that was great. I got paid. During my senior year, I made 3 movies. John and Faith Hubley, who were very famous animators. They were pioneers in the animation technique, and they started a course in animation, and of course thousands of people wanted to take the course, and I went in for the interview, and they said, why do you want to be an animator? And I said, well, I don't, but I'm willing to work your animation stand and just click the pictures. They said, you nuts? I said, no, I don't mind. So they let me into the course. What they didn't realize is that the year prior, I had walked into Life magazine in New York with my still photographs saying, I'm a better photographer than you got here, so why don't you hire me? And the woman there was very sweet, and her name was Ann Guerin. She sent me over to Sports Illustrated, and they looked at my pictures and they liked them and started hiring me. What Ann Guerin said was, why don't you do a picture story, not a lot of different pictures of different things. So I did a whole series of pictures on the Harvard crew, who was supposed to go to the Olympics in '64. Make a long story short, that summer I was in Europe. I was taking the photographs for an anthropologist for his small town in the Vaucluse in France. It later came out in a book called Chanzeau, and I did the still photographs for that. But in any event, while I was in Paris waiting to go to Chanzeau, I read in the Herald Tribune that the Harvard Boat Club's been upset by Vesper Boat Club. And when I got back to the States, Sports Illustrated, who was going to run all my pictures of the Harvard, gave me back a stack of, about 1,100 11 by 14 prints. So then, at night, after I finished clicking off all the animation pictures for the people in the animation course, they would lock up the building, not knowing I had hidden in the bathroom. And I would come out of the bathroom and go into the animation stand, would work all night long with the animation stand with these 11 by 14 pictures I had from Sports Illustrated of the crew. So in the course of 3 months, I must have had hundreds of hours on the animation stand, which was very expensive time. And so by the end of it, I had a 35mm black and white, wonderful little short about the Harvard crew. And also during that year, I cut together the footage. I shot some film in the French Village as well.
Was it 16mm or Super 8? Or?
16 black and white. I wanted to go to Europe, where I wanted to go traveling, and I had no money, so I just looked up as many anthropologists as I could, volunteering to take pictures for them. And Lawrence Wiley, the late Lawrence Wiley, was C. Douglas Dillon, professor of French civilization at Harvard. And he got C. Douglas Dillon to give me some money to take a movie camera along. So C. Douglas, he was Secretary of the Treasury, so in any event, when I came back, I worked with a guy named Tom Yeager on that too. We cut together the documentary footage on the French Village. I was shooting at nights in the animation room, unbeknownst to anybody. And then I made a short dramatic film too that year. So I made 3 movies my senior year.
How long were you in Europe?
About 12 weeks. I had my Ural pass, running around. I only shot pictures for about 2 weeks.
And was one of those shorts gold?
No, what happened was the Vietnam War was going on. I stayed at Harvard after I graduated to finish all 3 pictures, and then I ran to Cambridge in England, which is where I was going to avoid the army, and study fine arts. And when I was there, I realized I wasn't going to stay. And I saw a wonderful film called The Confessions of Felix Krull, where he goes to front of his draft board, says, I want to kill, I want to kill. So I wrote to my draft board saying I wanted to kill Vietnamese, draft me. And I used my tuition money to make Girl, the short film, which I shot up in Cambridge. And I met Ed Pressman at a party in London.
Was he a producer then?
No, he's my age. He was avoiding the army at the London School of Economics. But really, he was at Columbia Pictures in London, learning to be a producer. And he told me he'd tried to produce films with young people, but the editor would argue with the director, who would argue with the cameraman, who would argue with the writer. But I was the writer, editor, cameraman. So I said, you only have to argue with me. So he came up and watched shooting in Cambridge, and he liked what he saw. And we formed a company that next week in London called Pressman Williams, which went on to do Badlands and Revolutionary out of it. That's where Girl was made, in Cambridge that year. And then Cambridge agreed to let me go at the end of the year. I came back here to join the army, but They found me psychologically unfit. Just like they did Felix Krull in Germany.
Did they give you a reason?
Did they give me a reason? Well, I gave them some reasons.
So what did you do with Girl and your other films? Were they exhibited anywhere, or what happened to them?
Well, Crew, they still show it at Harvard, every reunion. Chanzeau, the French village, gets shown around some anthropological circles. Don't Walk, I've Lost, that was a little dramatic film. And Girl won a little Golden Eagle Award and was shown at film festivals and stuff like that.
Did you get any offers afterwards?
No, what happened there was I wrote a film called The Man Who Killed Men while I was shooting Girl. And what happened with that was, I wrote The Man Who Killed Men. And I also started writing a film called Out of It. I started writing Out of It. When we got back to the United States, David Picker at United Artists wanted to buy The Man Who Killed Men. I wouldn't sell it to him. I said, you can have it for free. Just let me direct it. I needed management. I have a daughter now who's directing it. She's 24. She's now directing her third film for MGM, Frank Mancuso. It's a big movie, $10 million. But she's got management. I had no manager. When he said, no, we can't have you direct a $5 million movie, I was 21. This is when $5 million was a lot of money. It still is to me, let me tell you, but not to the movie business. And so I said, okay, well, I'll write a lower budget movie. And I just continued working on Out of It.
Did you and Pressman raise the money?
Well, Out of It, when it was finished, we brought it back to David Picker at United Artists. He said he would buy it. I said, I have to direct it. You can have it for free. He said, forget it. Go home, talk to people. I'm offering to buy a movie from you. And I came back 3 times. And the last time he said, listen, you just don't know what you're doing. Anyway, we went around trying to sell Out of It to all the companies. We got turned down everywhere. And finally, Ed Pressman's mother, who was running a toy company, said she would put up $50,000. So we started shooting, and I made sure I was 2 weeks ahead of schedule within a week. And she liked the footage, and so did Ed, and so they told me to slow down. They'd put up some more money. So we finished the movie. It cost $138,000. I guess it's more like $500,000 today, or $600,000.
Where did you find Jon Voight?
Jon Voight, I was casting at William Morris, and we'd already paid Barry Gordon, this little kid who was in 1,000 Clowns, to play the lead. And John walked in, and I was just knocked out by his acting ability, and was so sorry. I wanted to have him play the lead, but we'd already paid Barry Gordon the extraordinary sum of $3,000, and we weren't going to throw it. So I told John right then and there, if you play a supporting role, I would write a movie for him, which I did, called The Revolutionary. But it was kind of love at first sight. He was great, absolutely great.
Had he had much experience beforehand, Paul? Do you know?
John? Well, yeah, sure. There were about 6 unemployed actors running around New York. Jon Voight, Dustin Hoffman, Al Pacino, Chris Walken, Bob Duvall. And these guys couldn't get the job. Everybody knew they were great. It was just a matter of time. So yeah, John was trained by Sandy Meisner. In fact, after we did, I guess it was The Revolutionary, I had gone off to study with some Sufi masters, Bolivians, and studied with them for about a year. And when I came back, John and I met, and I was trying to explain to him some of the stuff I had done, and he was explaining to me about Sandy Meisner. And then I had a run-in with a Tibetan Lama called Dingo Tensei Rinpoche, who was quite an extraordinary guy. And in doing tantric theater with him, I realized I would like to be an actor. So then John and I and a guy named David Proval set up a little group where John taught us the Sandy Meisner technique. So I'm not a bad actor. I mean, I'm not a great actor, but it's a lot of fun. It's more fun. I mean, that's who has all the fun, of the actors, right?
Directors have to work. The Revolutionary, Paul, it's a pretty unique film. It's got Jon Voight. It's got a great cast. It's got Jennifer Soul, Robert Duvall, and Seymour Cassell.
Well, the truth is, on The Revolutionary, the cast we had was Robert Duvall, Jon Voight, and Al Pacino, who was supposed to play Seymour Cassell's role, which was the Abby Hoffman character. Later, when Abby was on the 10 Most Wanted list, I hid in my house for about 2 months. That's another story. But Al Pacino had Abby down. He could do him incredibly. 2 weeks before we were going to start shooting, he won the Tony for a play he was doing called Tiger Wears a Necktie. And his agents were so certain he was going to be a big star, they didn't want him playing second fiddle to Jon Voight. So they pulled him out of the film. And so at the last minute, we had to look for a replacement.
With The Revolutionary, obviously you were influenced by the tumultuous times. Would that be correct?
Sure. The Revolutionary, for me, I was very serious about that stuff. In fact, I still am. See the guy on my wall? What it seemed to me is that most of the people who were radical in this country hadn't figured out how they felt about dying for what they believed in and how they felt about killing. And unless you really understand that issue, you have no business being in the revolutionary business. And that's what the movie was about. So I wanted to make it timeless and placeless and say the issue is how you feel about dying for what you believe in. I later became very good friends with Huey P. Newton, who wrote a wonderful book on revolutionary suicide. And we were very close friends. for a while. But the willingness to die for what you believe in is what gives you the strength. And that's the essence of that movie.
Dealing, or the Berkeley to Boston 40 Brick Lost Bag Blues, which was a novel written by the Crichton boys, Michael, and I didn't even know Michael had a brother called Doug. So tell me a bit how you came to that, Paul.
After making The Revolutionary, I went to Algeria to meet with Eldridge Cleaver and the North Korean terrorists who were planning a kamikaze attack on New York City. And while I was with them, I realized that a lot of murderous activity was about to take place. And I came back to New York. I won't go deeply into it. I'm actually writing a book about it called An Extraordinary Life That Made No Difference. But I came back from Algeria, and the FBI was on my tail, and the CIA, and I was definitely upset at the time. And I didn't want to set up the field hospitals in New York or blow up the power stations, which was supposed to be my mission. About that time, John Calley was president of Warner Brothers, and he sent me the book. And I read it on the plane, saying, yeah, I'll do it. I just want to get out of New York and away from the harassment and make a movie.
Independent film, or was the financing from the studio?
It was a big studio film. A lot of money from Warner Brothers. No, there's nothing little about it.
An interesting actor of the time who sort of seems to have disappeared, Robert F. Lyons.
I like Robert. He's a good guy. But the real story behind that is kind of amazing. I was making a film called Dealing. All the biggest dealers in the world came to visit me. I was in the bungalow behind the Beverly Hills Hotel. These guys would come in with their bodyguards and give me their best marijuana or their best cocaine or whatever it was. And I really wasn't into the drugs. And I'd try their wares and, of course, pass out. They were so strong. I started losing my memory. I was just totally out of my mind, sort of passing out between casting interviews. A guy came in. It was like when I first met Jon Voight. He was so wonderful. And I said, look, I'm passing out after every interview. You can't believe what's happening to me here, but please call me up in a few days and tell me I'm the guy who's just like Jon Voight. And you said I should be the star of your movie. So I said, okay. He said, okay, unknown actor. Make a long story short, I subsequently, next day, found out that Warner Brothers would cancel the movie unless I picked somebody to play the lead. The only guy who had just come in the day before was Robert F. Lyons, so I said, fine, Robert could do the role. Then just after Warner Brothers signed Robert F. Lyons, this kid calls me up saying, you know, you said I was just like Jon Voight and I could star in your movie. I said, oh my God, this is the worst mistake of my life. So anyway, that's how I originally met Richard Dreyfuss. And then I brought Dreyfuss to New York to improvise with another less-known actor called John Lithgow, and they got along great together, and I wanted them both to be in the film, but Warner Brothers would not pay off Lyons, so that was the end of that casting. That was the biggest mistake of my life, professionally speaking. I have millions of other mistakes.
Really? That's a big call there, Paul. That film starred Barbara Hershey as well, very early in her career, Charles Tooney. And who's Joy Bang? Because that's a very interesting name.
Joy Bang was in Watermelon Man with Godfrey Cambridge. She was in Dealer with Cisco Pike. And she's a good little actress. She was a friend of Jimi Hendrix. She later actually lived with Ed Pressman for a number of years. After that, actually, with my brother for a while. I think she's now in Minnesota.
And what about Robert F. Lyons? Where's he these days? Did he continue his career or did he retire? Do you know, Paul?
He does occasional work in films, and I think he teaches acting, too. He's a bright guy, and he writes.
After that, Nunzio, which was a regular when Australian TV had all-night TV, Nunzio was a regular on a station called Channel 9. It was a long time between Dealing and Nunzio. What were you doing between?
Oh, well, that was very exciting. First, I was in Algeria with the Panthers and the North Koreans. Then I came and was hanging with Huey Newton and Panthers up in Oakland. And he was on trial for murder. He jumped bail, and we had to escort him to Cuba. And then later, I went to Cuba to visit him and played basketball with Fidel Castro in 4-on-4 game. He kept elbowing me. I kept telling him, hey, you're cheating here. Then he'd start double dribbling, and I'd say, hey, Fidel. And he'd say, I'm the president of this country. I can make up the rules. Anyway, so I was doing that. And then I also spent a lot of time with these Tibetans and some Bolivians studying esoteric psychology.
Fascinating stuff.
I'm writing this book. It should be interesting.
Yeah, well, we're looking out for the book. Yeah. After Nunzio, Miss Right.
Oh, yeah.
With Karen Black. A great cast. Margot Kidder, Verna Lisi, Marie-France Pizier. And you did that in Europe?
I did that in Rome, and I had a wonderful time making that movie. I've never had so much fun making a movie. It was very funny. I enjoyed doing it. What can we say? That was wonderful times there because the Red Brigade was in their heyday, and I was getting out of L.A. because the woman I had been in love with, I didn't know she had a boyfriend named Jack Nitzsche, a famous composer, actually, and I was in bed with this woman, and he came in at 3 in the morning and found me with her, pulled a gun and put it at my head. My life flashed in front of me. Then he ended up raping her with a gun after I had fled the scene. And it was the first test of the California rape by instrumentality law, and it was getting national attention. But then she dropped the charges against him. But in any event, I thought I was attracting too much negative energy, so I ought to get out of the country. And I went to Rome, and I thought I was making a nice little comedy and staying out of trouble. And I fell in love with this wonderful woman. And just before the first night, I said to her, because I was still hearing footsteps from this psychopath Nitzsche, I said, "You don't have a boyfriend, do you?" She starts crying, and I said, "What's the matter?" Of course, I lose all the excitement I had at the moment. And she says, "Well, you don't have to worry about him. He's in jail for the rest of his life." I said, "Oh my God, what did this guy do?" He said, "Oh, he killed Aldo Moro, who was the Italian prime minister."
Who got kidnapped and murdered. Wow, you can pick him there, Paul.
I realized I was doing something wrong, so I think it was after that I was really sort of rededicated my life to more spiritual focus and got out of this political thing a little bit. I'm still very political, but in the sense that I'm post-ideological. I'm not left or right. I actually think we need a change in consciousness to affect anything. And in fact, I'm developing a film right now called Ice Cream, which has a lot of music and dance, and it's all about love.
Also, I noticed that you have been acting for yourself. Now, how is it directing your acting?
You cannot act well when you are directing. At least I can't. So I would say I give reasonable performances, but I wanted to do it as a life thing. In other words, most people pursue their careers, and I basically pursued a life. And so I've had some wonderful... I've gotten wiser and wiser. I may seem silly and foolish to you, but this actually is... I think silly and foolish is good. So one of the things I wanted to do was act, because I knew all these wonderful actors were having such a good time, and I wanted to really understand what they were doing. So I took 10 years off to study acting. And I got on stage every week, and I worked with Andy Garcia and Judge Reinhold, and, all kinds of people were in our acting workshop. And eventually, I did 2 movies. I starred in November Men, and I played a supporting Romeo thing. And of course, I directed them. That's how I got the job. No one else hires me. But now I've done it, and if somebody wants to hire me, I'm totally available. Right. But I'm never going to try to direct and act again.
So obviously you're enjoying the acting.
Well, I'm not doing that much of it anymore. I mean, basically, I'm very involved in this new film, Ice Cream, and I have a collective here of people who are making movies. I've trained my daughter and her friend Richard Hillman, Jr. He's done 10 films in the last... He's only 24 now. He's about to star in a movie. He just did a film with Daryl Hannah. He's about to star in another movie that my friend Jimmy's going to direct called The Blonde Man from Outer Space, which I'll produce. My daughter's directing big-time movies, so I have a collective of people who are doing a lot of really good things, but the measure of everything is not money, so...
What is your daughter's name, Paul, and what is the movie that she's working on at the moment?
Her name is Zoe, which is the life force. I had a wonderful Dalmatian named Zoe, and then we figured we replaced the dog with a kid. And Zoe Clark Williams. Clark is her mom's name. And the film she's doing is for MGM, and right now it's called Depraved Indifference. She did a film called Men. That was her first film, which I produced, starring Sean Young and John Hurd. And she just finished directing for Roland Joffe, who's produced the first dramatic series for MTV called Undressed. She directed the pilot. So she's doing really well.
Sounds as if she's doing better than the old man, maybe.
No, there's no question. In terms of the material world and fame and successes, we know it among the earthlings.
Yeah. You have a lot of strong support among us aficionados.
Yes, well, I appreciate it. My mother loves company.
Exactly. All right, Paul, well, we better leave it there. I want to thank you very much for talking, and I just want to mention Mirage had a great cast with Edward James Olmos and Sean Young, and you, of course.
It's important movies appear. Chances are they should have appeared 2 decades ago, because nobody here really wants to take a chance to upset the apple cart.
Do you think Hollywood is far more conservative than it used to be, which is saying something, isn't it?
Well, I think the world. I think Patty Chayefsky's, that speech he had, who is it? Ed gives the speech in...
Network.
In Network, yeah, that wonderful speech about the world becoming a corporate conglomerate. Yeah, I think there's a total mythology about democracy and freedom, and it's dead. Everybody's gone shopping. Nobody wants to do anything but shop.
All right then, Paul. We'll leave it on that ideological note, and wish you all the best with Ice Cream and all the other projects that come up, and also your daughter and your partner's daughter as well.
Thanks very much.